Welcome to another edition of In Focus. My name is Bob Perreault, and very pleased to be joined in the studio today by our local MPP for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston. It is Independent.
Independent member for Lanark, Frontenac, and Kingston. Have a very Merry Christmas, everyone.
There we go. It's Mr. Randy Hillier joining us, as he does when the legislature breaks every time. And it ended yesterday. The session ended yesterday, so you're back here in Lanark, Frontenac, and Kingston, specifically in Lanark today. And we wanted to talk about a number of different things that came up over the course of this particular session, things that you've been working on. I'm going to hit you right off the top. We talked about this in your last visit, ideas that you had to kind of head off the impasse that we're seeing in the talks with the education workers and the teachers. Your suggestions weren't taken by the government, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on what's going on now.
Yeah, it was unfortunate, Bob, and we're seeing the results of with numerous strikes and continuation of strikes, and now constitutional challenges by the teachers' unions on legislation. I provided the school boards, the teachers' unions, and the government with an option to form a select committee to deal with the problems in education. And I think this is an important consideration. I think we've got the cart and the horse in the reverse order at the present time, and both the unions and the government, in my view, are looking at education only through a financial lens, and not talking about the problems that we're facing in public education. And my view is this, that if we talk about the problems first and find resolutions to those problems, agreement on how to deal with them, then we can look at the financial considerations of what it would cost to solve these problems. Instead, the government is looking at everything through how much is this labor collective agreement going to cost? Mm-hmm. And the teachers are looking at this through a financial lens as well. So I did speak with the Minister of Education earlier this week and expressed my disappointment that of not forming a select committee. I think it would be fair to characterize our conversation that he didn't see. I think he sees more value in it now than he did when I corresponded with him a number of months ago, and I think we still may see that a select committee does get formed and we actually start looking at the problems.
Oh, so it could be a possibility.
Yeah.
So let's say it does get formed. Give me an example of one of the problems that you would like to examine and sort of take us through how that would work as it differentiates from what they're doing now.
Well, let's use one that's topical, is classroom size.
Okay.
When I was a kid in school, there was no such thing as classroom sizes. People, school boards and teachers and whatnot, did the best they could, and it worked pretty well.
With however many students.
With however many, and they jiggled and jigged the numbers as best they could in a practical sense. Since then, we also have expanded the role of public education, and we've made a decision that everybody has a right to have a public education, mm-hmm. regardless of their own circumstances. So, and we've seen this over the years where people with learning disabilities, people with behavioral problems, people on the autism spectrum, they all have a right to a public education. But I don't think we ever had a discussion, how do we put those pieces together? And what are the resources that are required? How should this all look? And I'm saying, that it's time that we do this and say, what are the proper supports that are required in the classroom for people that require individualized learning plans, people who may have learning disabilities, whatever the case may be. If we're going to do this, we need to understand how we're going to make it function at the end of the day. And that may require classroom caps in some cases, and it may require very different expectations of size of classrooms in other situations. So I think there's a lot, or it may be that, I was speaking with my son in Calgary, who's a teacher, and they have a very different way to deal with these aspects than we do here in Ontario. So I think there's an opportunity for us to have some serious discussions, see what the best solutions are for all these problems, because we have problems. We have very significant failings in math scores and literacy scores. We have a lot of students that we know are going on to post-secondary, and the universities surveys are showing that people haven't got all the skills required for post-secondary. So I think we should really look at the problems first, see if we can find what the solutions are to those problems, then find out how much money we have to put forward and fix these things.
I'm gonna switch gears here pretty quick as we move through, just to get through as much as we can. You're looking at constitutional reform. This is certainly something that you've been working on since you have become an independent. So where's that stand right now? What's the latest?
Well, I have filed my affidavits. I have served notice. I'm expecting the constitutional challenge to be heard next year in the Superior Court of Justice.
And outline the challenge for us.
So,
what are you asking for?
So right at the present time, as an independent member, I am not allowed to raise funds for my re-election in 2022.
Okay.
Right? It's off limits. It's prohibited. Whereas when I was a member of a caucus, I was allowed to raise money for my re-election. So inherently, you can see the discriminatory function of the law. It gives an undue advantage to members of a political party and treats independent members as second-class citizens.
Is there any explanation on record as to why?
Well, this is all just, I can say this factually because I've been involved in the discussions on the development of the election finance laws. It's there to give parties an advantage, and it does. So I'm very confident we'll be successful in that challenge, and that I will have the same opportunities as members of a political party to be able to finance a re-election campaign.
Are there any other independents who are working with you on this, or is this something you're sort of spearheading?
I've had some,
I know you're spearheading it, but I mean...
Yeah, I've had a number of discussions with some federal members as well who are independent. And I've had a number of discussions with other democracy-oriented organizations such as Samara and whatnot. I think we're going to see a lot of interest and a lot of support when this goes to the Superior Court and gets heard.
Now, you wrote an op-ed that was in the Toronto Star, I do believe,
Yes.
About life as an independent.
Yeah, it was quite. The Toronto Star ran that opinion piece this week, and it's since also been picked up in our local Metroland papers and others. And it's been a real breath of fresh air being an independent member, and maybe I'll characterize it this way, Bob. A lot of people thought when I left the party, or when I was removed, however you want to characterize that dispute, that as an independent, your days are over and you're off into the wilderness. Well, in fact, it's been anything but. We had a wonderful conversations with the new government House Leader. We got substantial reforms done to the standing orders that permit independent members to be more engaged, to ask more questions, to be more engaged and involved in our standing committees of the House in debate. And what's really, so that characterized and reawakened something in me, that here we are, 11 independents in the House, former Conservatives, current members affiliated with the Liberal Party, Green Party members, from the whole spectrum. And we were all working together to share our time, to be engaged in committees. And it works. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to see a group of people across party lines working together to do their job, and it's been very, it's been a breath of fresh air.
It sounds almost like a town council.
Well, it's like what normal people do, you know, and well, and that's, you know, politics is not a normal environment.
Not at all.
You know, most people are not engaged in an adversarial combat in their lives. So this has been a real breath of fresh air. It's been with good, tangible outcomes. And listen, you know, it's very nice to be able to stand up and applaud the government when they do something well, and at the next moment, when they do something wrong, to be very critical. And I have done both, you know, on things such as their cannabis rollout, on things with these recent increases on hydro that are contrary to what they campaigned on. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to be able to stand up and say we've got a better decorum in the House, that the government House leader is working with us, but also, you know, why aren't you doing what you said that you were going to do and lower hydro rates? And I think that's what most people expect of an elected representative, to speak truthfully, to speak forthrightly, to bring their concerns, and to be critical when criticism is expected and due, but also to applaud or commend somebody when they do a good job.
Has your political views changed at all since becoming an independent? Like, you were a conservative, you're a progressive conservative in Ontario, and you just talked about working with other parties and working with other individuals. How do you, you know, compare your views to then as to now?
Well, I don't know if there's, you know, my political views and my philosophical underpinnings have not changed. You know, I do believe in more effective, less intrusive government. I do believe in permitting the marketplace to find solutions, in that it's not just nanny-style big government that should be finding solutions. Where the difference is, and it's not just me, it's all of us, all the independents are saying we can have disagreement on outcomes. We can have disagreements on votes, but more foundational to that is our ability to speak in the House freely and to work with one another to achieve that.
It's the journey to get to those points.
Sure, and like I said, this is not just me, but it's just been a real breath of fresh air to see that people in Queen's Park working with one another and not attributing or impugning their motives that underlie the discussions. Like, I can speak with Mike Schreiner, and I supported, the other day I supported his motion on another reform to the standing orders, and the government agreed with it. The NDP were not overly in favor of it, but at the end of the day, the motion carried. Mm-hmm. So those are all good aspects of being an independent. As I said, you know, it's a more civilized way to conduct oneself. So what we've seen as an independent, and at the end of the day, also more productive and more rewarding, and I would say more beneficial to our constituents, my constituents, and more beneficial to the province.
It's a really interesting take, and I'm glad you shared that with us because I think a lot of people, were curious where your mindset is, and it's interesting to hear how it's, I don't want to say changed, but shifted, and more appreciate what you're experiencing now.
Well, I think it comes down to this, is most people, because the party system is so dominant, everybody looks at politics through that partisan lens to some degree, greater or lesser, but it's through that partisan lens. Am I Randy Hillier, member of Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston, or am I a conservative?
Yeah.
Some people say, well, I'm just a conservative. You're attached to a party label. There's more to it than being a part of it. And where I was going with that, I guess, is many people see if you're not inside that party apparatus, you're a nobody, or you're in the wilderness, you're exiled. And it's the exact opposite is true.
Well, there's two more things that I want to address with you. The first one is your private members bill. We're getting tight on time here, so just give us an update if you could.
Well, I did introduce my bill. It will be debated in February. It's the name of it is the Public Accountability and Lobbyist Transparency Act. It's a detailed bill, but essentially, and we should have a conversation strictly on the bill after.
I'd love to.
But it allows the public to be engaged where they're not presently allowed to be engaged on things such as the Legislative Assembly Act, the Members' Integrity Act, the Public Service Act, and it provides a much greater watchdog opportunity for people to be to have oversight over both elected representatives and members of the public service. So I'm really looking forward to it, to bring this forward. It addresses a lot of the concerns that I've seen over the years of when there's unsavory or less than appropriate behavior undertaken by government, and people are at a disadvantage to be able to address that and fix it.
I agree that we should have a longer discussion on this, and I'll have you back in. But it's really interesting the way that you're doing this, because the government can now, it's going to look interesting in either way. It's like if they decide not to support this, or if they speak out against it, then the public would be saying, well, what have you got to hide? But then if they do support it, then it changes things dramatically as far as what we as the public see.
Yeah, I think it'll be difficult for the government to find cause to oppose this bill, and I think this is not about anything that happened yesterday or last week or a month or two ago. This is my observations over 13 years of how we can have the public engaged and assure that elected members and members of the public service are acting in their best interests.
We'll talk about this at greater detail. We will. You just talked about engaging the public, and you want them to be engaged this weekend. How's that for a segue?
This weekend is one of my favorite weekends. Of course, this weekend is on Sunday. My 13th annual Hootenanny is at, this year it's at the Grand Hotel again in Carleton Place, and it's from 2 to 4 p.m. And we have the world-famous Bowes Brothers will be there once again, singing our favorite tunes and Christmas songs. And so I encourage everybody, this is just a fun event. It's time for me to show my appreciation and of all the wonderful people in the riding, but people that help me, the constituents who give me a call and ask for my advocacy. It's just a good social fun time, and my opportunity to express my appreciation to all the good people in Lanark, Frontenac, and Kingston.
I know it's an annual tradition, and it's so well attended, and people who go. I've never been, unfortunately, and I always seem to be tied up on that day. But I hear it's really good. But I do look forward to seeing you in person on Christmas Eve because you'll be back in, of course. The 23rd, I should say.
Yes.
Yeah, for the annual Lake 88
Christmas
Kitchen Party.
Eve comes early at Lake 88
Yes, it does.
this year, I understand. So, yes, on the annual kitchen party is going to be on Monday, December 23rd. I'll be looking forward to coming back to the lake for the kitchen party.
And, of course, you'll do your annual reading.
And we'll do my best to be able to remember the words of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas."
Randy, I want to thank you very much for coming in. We'll see you on the 23rd, and we'll have a discussion about that private members bill in the new year. Thank you so much for coming in, sir.
It's always a pleasure. I look forward to seeing everybody at the Hootenanny on Sunday. And if I don't, have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll be back for Christmas Eve.
Absolutely. And remember that Hootenanny taking place at the Grand Hotel in Carleton Place 2 until 4 o'clock. All right. Randy Hillier, thank you so much for being here. Our guest today, as just mentioned, independent MPP for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston, Mr. Randy Hillier. I'm Bob Perreault. Have a wonderful weekend.